Hey, and welcome to this Rimworld Beginner's Guide. In this guide, I'll be going over menus and basic controls so you can navigate the early game. If you played this game more than a few times, consider yourself mildly intermediate or advanced, this guide is probably not going to be useful for you. However, I'm going to try and chuck in a few extra tips that you possibly didn't know along the way. For example, if you click on your colonists at the top here, you can actually shift them around by right-clicking and dragging. And it took me an astounding 420 hours of in-game time before I discovered that. But to get on with the more basic controls and to kind of introduce you to this game a little bit, I'm playing on Crash Landed, Cassandra Classic AI Storyteller, on Adventure Story, on a temperate forest map with large hills. And this is the reason I'm playing like this is because this is the type of mode I would highly recommend you setting up for your first playthrough. And if you want to know the ins and outs of why, you can check out my other Rimworld guide, Beginner's Guide Setting Up, which you'll find in the link below, as well as over on my channel and in the Rimworld guide playlist. So let's get started with probably the most basic controls that there are, which is movement around the screen, which is WASD, or you can hold down the middle mouse button and move around your mouse. To scroll in and out, you flick your middle mouse button, scroll wheel, that's what I meant to say. And then some other basic controls are your pause, play, and time functionality. You can see them down here. You can actually use your mouse to go between them, but I recommend getting used to pressing spacebar a lot because that will be your biggest friend and ally as you play through, so you can kind of slow things down and create tactics when you're being raided, and also just kind of plan what you're doing next. 1, 2, and 3 is how you control the speed, and then pause play will pause and play between the latest speed that you are on, except for when you're being raided, in which case it will force it to only play at 1 speed. So next I'm going to go through all of the different menus along this bottom, what they mean, how to use them effectively, and then we'll go from there. So Architect, this is your build, zoning, and orders. Orders are things like chop this wood and cut this plant and harvest this berry bush. Basically pretty self-explanatory as to what they all do. Allows a pretty useful one in the early game. You can kind of allow all the stuff. So yeah, this is a very useful tab within your architect sector, and you can also navigate across with shortcuts. It labels all of them. Next you have your zone. It's the same kind of menu, just it's zoning. So your stockpile zones, where you want to store stuff, where you want to dump stuff, such as slag and chunks. You can also set up things like your grow zones, expand allowed areas. This you can set up, you can manage your areas, you can add new areas, you can select which one you'd like to expand, and then you can set your colonists to only be allowed in that area, or your animals only to be allowed in that area. You can also clear them such that they don't exist anymore. Finally, your home zone, which you can see that home zone is it automatically generates, and that's because I have this down here, which I will get to these controls a little later on. But this here, if I toggle this on and off, it means whenever I do something like add a zone or claim something or build something, it will home zone it. And home zone is kind of important because 1, you'll put out fires in the area, 2, it will be the only area that you can clean, or that cleaning will automatically occur, and 3, it kind of auto allows things that have died or dropped in that area. For example, if your hens lay an egg and they aren't within a home zone, that egg will be disallowed. Okay, so on to the next menu within the architect section, which is structure. This allows you to build structures such as walls and doors and fences. Production. This is basically any area or bench that you produce something on. Furniture, beds, lights, tables, chairs, basically comfort, sleeping, and lighting, and decoration a little bit, plant pots. This is where you go. Just as a quick tip and FYI, tables are very useful in the early game, and you can very quickly find a ruins nearby and claim one of the tables, and then set your colonists to eat at it. You can uninstall it, or you can reinstall it, say over here, because you want to set your base up over here. If you set some chairs around it, your colonists will use this to eat, and they'll be infinitely happier, which is a bit of a meme within the Rimworld world. Security, and this is where this is the most stark menu so far, and most obvious that you would hope that more is to be unlocked, and you'd be right. If you go to the research screen, you'll be able to see a bunch of stuff you can unlock, but security is your security. Later on, you'll have turrets and mortars and all sorts that you can use, especially if you add mods later down the road. Miscellaneous is basically anything that doesn't quite belong anywhere, but kind of maybe could have been shoehorned in somewhere, but the developers decided not to. I kind of agree with some of these, they just don't quite fit. Another quick tip is if you want more information, you can press the I. This will tell you everything from their weight and cover effectiveness and flammability and all sorts. Another tip I probably should have said first, if you right click, you can choose the material which you would like to build said item from. Flaws, self-explanatory, they're flaws. Flaws are more useful than you may think, but can also be a disadvantage, especially in the early game. They are cleaner and better to look at sometimes, and you can move faster across them. In the case of concrete, they're not better to look at, but you can move across them faster. But you do have to clean them more regularly than, say, dirt is just always dirty, so you don't really have to clean it. Recreation. This is the OG and the best thing to get in the early game for your recreation is the wooden horseshoe pin. If you're playing on tribal, this will actually be a little hoop, but it's the same concept. It gives your colonists something called dexterity recreation type, dexterity play. Just as a quick FYI, and it doesn't really matter in the early game, but your colonists will get bored of just a single recreation type. So you will want to add something like cerebral play, which is something like the chess table, and later on you can add other things such as TVs and all sorts that you can unlock further down the road. Next is the ship. It will be completely empty for you unless you have decided to edit your scenario. This is because it is pretty much the last thing you build before you technically complete the game. Temperature being the last one we're going to look at, which is self-explanatory. It controls the temperature of the room. The campfire and passive cooler just uses wood to both build and then maintain it. The heater and cooler use electricity and these sealing components, and then vents allow you to push heat or cool between rooms by switching the vent on and off. It's quite useful when you're trying to control and be energy conscious, especially if you're in a hot or really cold tile. Next tab we're onto is the work tile, and you will see it just like this, a bunch of ticks and all of the things from higher priority to lower priority, higher on the left, lower on the right. I always switch on manual priorities, and the reason I switch on manual priorities is because sometimes I may want someone to hunt only when they haven't got any construction to do. So if I tick this on, you can see there's numbers. The lower the number, the higher priority, and so we go down to 1. Left click to bring it down, right click to bring it up, and then if you hold down shift and select the title, you can bring up and down. I'm going to go into this more in a building your first base and surviving the ultra early game guides, actually the next guide I'm going to do, but just an FYI, put your firefight to 1, put your patient to 1, and then you can kind of decide like, oh, this guy's my best hunter, I'm going to set him as 1, but I also want a second hunter, so I'm going to set him as 2. What I actually usually do is I actually set this to 2 and then this to 3, and then like left hand side I kind of treat these as these are critical. Middle section I set this like 2s and 3s, and then right hand side I might set my research to 1 because I really want this person to research, and then otherwise I normally leave these around 3s, 4s, and then bring them up to 1s when it gets really dirty and I want some cleaning done. I won't go into more detail on this. That's kind of how you set the priorities up, and onto the next menu, which is the schedule. This is also pretty self-explanatory. In this section you can also select and deselect what areas they should be set to. Home, area 1 and area 2, I showed them in the zoning earlier, and then you can also set them to be able to do anything, for example, or sleep and then work for a period of the day, and then make sure you have some recreation time. And then if you press this button here, you can copy and paste it all the way down. You can also manage your areas from this tab, but that is this menu pretty much entirely explained. Next is your assign. This is how you control and assign what foods, outfits and drugs your colonists will take, as well as you can also from this menu set up what medicine you're going to allow for them. And if you select this, you can select what type of medicine. You click and drag to bring the same for everyone else. And this here is what they do when they get under attack. I always leave them on flee. The main reason I leave them on flee is because that allows me to usually realize that something's going on and I can get into the situation, and they usually create some space between them and the problem. But again, you can set them to ignore or to attack depending on the colonist and what you'd like them to do, and then if you click and drag down you can. Oh, this person is a pacifist, so that's why I couldn't get them to fight. On the right hand side here you also have, say, whoever your doctor is. You'll probably want to set them to carry a certain amount of meds and tell them what type of meds. You should match the meds that they should carry with the ones that your colonists are allowed to have used on them, and this just allows them to be a field medic or just also have meds right on hand. So if your colonist is badly injured, they don't have to run all the way to where the meds are and then all the way back. It can sometimes save a life. You can also manage the different food restrictions and outfits. If you go in here, you can say select an outfit, and then you can say I don't want them wearing t-shirts or armor. And okay, so this may seem like, oh, why would you bother not telling them to do this? And this is so that you can control, maybe say you want to set up melee people to have certain armor because they're going to be on the front lines, whereas your shooters, you want them to have different armor that is maybe going to boost their ability to shoot better. You can also basically do the exact same thing with food restrictions, so things like setting their corpses to don't eat corpses and don't eat raw resources and don't eat raw foods, basically turning off things that may be given food poisoning. You can also set up different food restrictions. Maybe you have a cannibal and you're going to allow them to eat human meat, and the same sort of thing applies with drug policy. It's slightly different menu. You can tell them how many to keep in their inventory, whether or not you want to only allow them to use it if they're addicted to it, only allow them to use it for recreation purposes, or if you just want to set people to use it on a schedule so that they use it every X number of days. And you can also, when you set them on a schedule, you can also set it so they only use it if their mood is below 50%. So if I take it off recreational, I usually do something like this. In the early game, you don't need to worry too much about this until you start creating drugs. You can also create new policies, rename them, and delete them, and that's the same across all those menus. You can create new and delete the existing. I usually only have 1 or 2 of each, and then expand out as my colony grows and depending on what's needed. Next tab is your animals. This is where you can see all of the animals that you own. You'll see that I have Zeke, the donkey. You can see their sex, their age, where they are in life, in stage. You can then also set what type of handling and training they receive. Now, donkeys can't receive very much, but tameness basically allows them to not become untame and wander away. Guard, they will guard someone. Attack, same thing. It's not exactly the same controls as a colonist, but they kind of like, if you set dogs or set your predators onto someone, if you have a lot of them, it can be a useful way of fighting. There's also rescue. Basically, if they see a downed colonist, they will go and rescue them. And then haul, which is the most useful, to be perfectly honest, because you can basically just, they set an area that you want them to be in and they'll haul a bunch of stuff for you, so you don't have to set your colonist to it. You can also get them to follow the master when they're drafted, or follow the master while they're doing certain work. This is so you can set kind of guards to masters so that they're always in like a position to be protected. You can see who they are bonded to and who the master is. In the case of Zeke, he won't have a master or bonding because he's not a smart enough creature. And you'll see over here it says pen needed, and this basically means he needs a pen, otherwise he will eventually wander away. You can also set them to be slaughtered, set what type of medicine. I recommend never really going above herbal, which is usually enough to deal with all but the absolute worst of infections. And then finally, release to the wild, pretty self-explanatory. So allowed areas, you'd normally have the same options as when you go to the schedule, but for the animals. But because this is an animal that only can be within a pen, you can basically just put them in a pen. You can also manage the areas from here. And then finally you have auto slaughters. Next tab we have is wildlife, and this basically lists all of the wildlife that is on the map. You can click on it and take you over to the wildlife, and you can see what sex it is. You can see the whether it's an adult or baby, and then you can see like you can mark it to be hunted or tamed. You can't do both, by the way, because you can't be taming something that you're trying to kill. FYI, this percentage means that, so for when you're attacking the animal to hunt it, every time you hit it with an arrow or a bullet, because by the way, if you melee attack any animal, it will attack you back, whereas if you range attack it, this is the chance that it will attack you back on a successful hit. So a warg will 100% of the time attack you back if you hit it with a bullet. This number does go down and up technically in the sort of background based on how good your hunter is and how far away your hunter is. Also, another thing to bear in mind is pack animals, say buffalo. If you attack one and it goes mad on you because you've attacked it and you've hit that 10% chance, there's also a chance to trigger that the entire herd will attack you. The next thing is the tame. You can again click to tame or not. Animals do have a tame level, a minimum tame level, so you have to have that in your animal skills. And then also, if you fail to tame it, they have a 30 or 10% chance depending on the animal, or some of them, you see this dash here, this means they will never attack you whether you fail, no matter how many times you fail. Same with alpaca, they will never attack you if you shoot at them, they will never attack you if you try to tame them, whereas a warg will always attack you if you try to hunt it, but will only attack you 40% of the time if you fail to tame it. This little mark here just means that they are a predator, and this eye will take you to this menu that tells you a bunch of information, most of which you will probably never need or even look at. The sort of main ones, I guess, is what does it eat, what the minimum handling is for it. Yeah, you can kind of find out quite a lot. But anyway, that's how you get up some more information, and you can also then type in to the search function, which whenever you see a search function, you can kind of type in and it will kind of bring down just the stuff that contains that word. So that is your wildlife menu. Next is the research menu. This gives you a list of all the research. Again, I'm on vanilla, so as you decide to install mods, which there is an amazing modding community for Rimworlds, so I obviously highly recommend it. But as you unlock mods, as you download mods, you'll have more menus and more stuff to unlock. But this is your research menu. Once you have a research table set up and going and someone set to research, you can tell them to research certain things. That's basically as simple as it goes. Each one will tell you, so these grayed out ones require something beforehand. It will tell you what you require. Quests throughout the game, as you play through it, you'll get quests come up. On the available tab, it tells you which ones are available for you to accept. They'll give you possibly a list of different rewards, and it usually comes with something negative like a raid or weather change or something being set up nearby that's annoying, or any number of things that can be difficult to deal with. But if you choose to deal with it for the reward, usually the rewards outweigh the difficulty. Active, your active quests. Historical are your failed, declined, ran out of time ones. You can also set your reward preferences to whether or not you want to accept goodwill as one of the rewards. The next thing is your world tab. This brings up the world that you're on. So you can see I'm on like a 30% standard world that I just randomly generated. From here, you'll be able to set like, oh, how far is it from here to here? Oh, it'll take me 1.1 days. You can set up multiple routes with that. And yeah, this is just kind of your world, and you can kind of click around it. You can set up a caravan, form caravan, zoom in or abandon. You can't abandon an area if you have colonists on the tab that are still on the tile that are still alive. But let's zoom back in and we'll go on to the next one, which is your history. Basically, this is your graphs of your wealth, population, and your colonists move. As your wealth goes up, your raids and things get harder. Messages is just the messages, so obviously we just started, so it's just the message that pops up, and other ones will occur. They tend to be like your alerts along the side here. And statistics, it's your general statistics. Next is your factions, just a list of all the factions and how they feel about you and how they're tending towards feeling about you. These next few things on the HUD here are useful overlays and different things. So for example, if you hover over anything, it will pretty much tell you, but this will toggle automatic rebuild of destroyed structures in a home area. So if a structure is within a home area and you click this on, it will rebuild it. This is the automatic home zone. Some people are on the fence about this. I tend to leave mine on until I really want to control it to fine detail. Usually just annoying because it will give like a buffer around stuff that you claim, and I'd probably recommend leaving yours on for the first few playthroughs. Terrain affordance is basically, can you build on this piece of land? No, you can't, because it's mud. The next one is fertility. This just allows you to see how fertile the soil is. Dark green is very fertile, orange is unfertile, light green is standard fertile. If it has no color, you cannot grow on it. The next is your roof. So you can see that this light green is to show that it's mountainous roof, natural roof, but you can take it down. If it's a dark green, if you mine into this mountain, there'll be dark green. That's overhead mountain. You cannot get rid of that. Next, we have the toggle categorize mode on the resource readout. So this basically just changes what your resources look like at the top there. Colonist bar gets rid of them. I don't really know why you'd want to do that unless you had like 100 colonists. That's probably the only time when you'd want to start doing that. Next you have is this one, which is a room display. Basically, when you select it and you hover into a room that is enclosed, it will tell you a bunch of information about the room, like how good it is. So you go from everything from awful all the way up to extremely impressive, and the size of the room takes factor, beauty, the wealth. You kind of have to have good in everything to get the top level rooms, and they usually don't have that much of a benefit. It can be handy to have it. The next one is the beauty display. So if you select this, you can kind of see, oh yes, this is really ugly around here because we've got a lot of -1s, and it tells you just the total average beauty as well. Next we have the toggle visibility of zones. That just means you can see these zones or not. See that? They disappear and come back. It's quite subtle. And toggle learner helper. So this will go away once these kind of have finished telling you this information. So you can mark these as learned, and you can turn it off once you have marked everything as learned. And finally, let's just go through quickly the colonist controls and generally what you can see about your colonists. R will draft and undraft them. You can select multiple by clicking and dragging either on the map where they are or along the top where they are, and you can draft all of them or not draft them all. Next, you can see within their thing, you can see their log. This tells you basically anything that they've done recently, anything at all. And then next you have your gear tab. This tells you what gear they have. Useful information is to see this temperature range here. We can see that it's 1 degree outdoor in this map tile. That means that this person will be getting cold and can get hypothermia or heat stroke if they're outside of their comfortable range for any length of time at any extreme level. So this person, if it stays at 1 degree, will start to become unwell if we don't give them some sort of shelter from the elements. You can also see their armor. Now armor works quite interestingly in this game, and I will go into that in the future on like raids, but higher percentage is better. It's good to know. You can also see what apparel they're wearing, what they're carrying in their inventory. This will include also their weapon that they will have on, and you can also tell them to take it off. And you can also see information about it. So this is giving them 4.8 cold, 2.2 heat. It covers this sort of area with this sort of armor rating, and yeah, it kind of tells you all the information you need to know about it. As you wear items over time, they will slowly lose durability until they hit 49%. When they hit 49%, they will become tattered, and your colonists will become upset, and they will basically continue to decline until 0%. They will literally disintegrate into nothing. So at some point or another, you will have to figure out how to either make or buy clothing. So just as an FYI. Next, you have your social tab, which tells you who they're friends with, and etc., who they hate, who they're married to. And next is your bio. You would have seen the screen pretty much exactly like this, only in a different sort of format on when you were selecting your colonists. From this, you can see their traits, what they're incapable of, their background, and all of their levels. You can also see what they belong to. So when you click on a raider, you can obviously see what faction they belong to. You can also rename them. So you can go in here and rename them. You can also banish them, say you don't want them anymore for whatever reason, they're being a pain in the butt, and you just want to get rid of them but you don't want to kill them, you can banish them. Next is your needs. When their mood drops, they have tantrums and cause problems. But yeah, you start with very low expectations. This person's a sanguine, so it basically gives them a boost, and they have initial optimism, which will go away in about 8 days, but they are chilly, and this person's greedy for an impressive bedroom. You can also see these different bars here. As they go down, they'll get things like hungry, malnourished, or sleepy, exhausted. So you need to combat that with as many positives you can give them. And then this outdoor meter, people eventually get upset about being indoors too much, unless they're undergrounder, in which case that bar doesn't really exist. I don't think I've got anyone. So this person's got chemical interest, so they have an additional bar. Basically, when this goes down, they basically want to take drugs. If you don't have any drugs available, they will become upset. Can be difficult to deal with in the early game. Later game, it doesn't matter so much because you can tend to produce enough drugs that it's not really much of a problem. Next is your health. So I picked an absolute terrible pawn, a colonist. They are not very well. You can see this by the different lists of things that are wrong with them. And this little circle here basically means that they need treatment. And then when this is filled with a big yellow dot, that means that they are currently treated for it. You can then hover over everything and see that this is giving him 80% of his consciousness, and then on top of that 90% of movement, and then 90% manipulation. So if I hover over here, it will say this is affected by the fact that crypto sleep sickness, the right leg is 26, your breathing is only at 90%, and your consciousness is only at 77%, which has moved, this person moves 63% of what they could totally move, their total move speed. And you can see things like their total move speed by going into view information, and this will tell you everything from their current move speed, and you can see that it's normally 4.6, but it's being multiplied by 63%. And you can get a bunch of information from here. You can see more about their bio, again, their health and their records of what they've been up to, but their stats is kind of probably the thing that you'll look into the most. You can also see you can set the medicine from here and set defaults, so what a new colonist will automatically default to Glitterworld. I usually set this to herbal until later game when I can create my own industrial and save Glitterworld only for massive emergencies. Self-tend, this person cannot ever self-tend because they're not a doctor, but basically this allows doctors to self-tend on themselves, but this will be at 70% the normal efficiency as it says there, which means if you have a really good doctor, then self-tending makes sense if they're better than everyone. But if you have two people that are roughly the same medical experience, then you wouldn't want to self-tend because you want to try and get as much as you can from it. Finally, last but not least, is this operations tab where you can set up operations. This will be more later game, but you can do things like install a peg leg, say in his right leg. If it becomes worse, he gets another painful scar or it gets shot off, then you could add a peg leg, which is probably the most basic prosthetic in the game. And finally, I guess, would be this menu here. You can save, load, review your scenario, select options to change any in-game options, quit to main menu, and quit to OS. But that pretty much covers the sort of basic controls. All of the things you can see have shortcuts that you can learn and use. In my next guide, I'll be going over how you start out at the very beginning, your first things you should be doing to ensure survival. After that, I'm going to be looking at doing like some food guides, some raid guides, so keep an eye out for them. If you found this video useful or interesting in any capacity, I would really appreciate a like. If I said anything wrong, need corrections, maybe the game's been updated since this video's come out, please chuck it down in the comments, and if there's any guides that you would like me to do in the future, please also chuck them down in the comments.